How can you stop blaming yourself for your toxic job? What mistake do most toxic work survivors make that I don't want you guys to make? And how do you actually get over your toxic job? That's what we're going to be talking about today. First, real fast, I'm gonna do something that I haven't done before, and I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of an update about me because I've been posting about it. If you're not interested, I'm gonna have the chapters linked in the description so you can jump to any point in this video that you would actually like to get to. Now, for those of you who follow along with my community posts, you know that a couple of weeks ago, I had a flood in my office/studio. So I have temporarily set it up so that I can film this video for you guys. However, it is still out of commission. We still have to get repair work done. It is still leaking, not from like the tropical storm hurricane thing anymore, but we are still having water come in. So I'm not totally moved in yet. It's really annoying. But I also decided while I'm at it, because I have to do some repair work in here anyways, I decided that I'm going to upgrade the space and actually build out more of a studio, more filming spaces for myself. And with that, I just decided to upgrade my equipment. So I have some new stuff that I'm filming with today. So if anything's weird, it's because I'm actually still getting used to my new lighting, my new microphone. Like I know there's a shadow behind me that's gonna drive me and you absolutely nuts now that I've pointed it out. So sorry about that. But really what I wanted to say to you guys was I wanted to thank you so much for all of the support that you gave me, because I did have to change my video upload schedule because I want to make sure that you guys are still getting content on a regular basis from me. And I had so many wonderful messages from you guys on that post, in my DMs, over on Instagram, over on LinkedIn. And really, I feel so lucky that we have created this wonderful community here. While we talk about toxic jobs and it's not easy, and a lot of us are going through hard times when we first arrive here, it's really incredible to me the way that we support each other. And it really got me through some very stressful times in the last few weeks. So I wanted to thank you, my career besties. Anyways, I'll stop telling you about myself and let's just get into the actual video now. All right, let's talk about blame and shame after leaving a toxic job or when you're in a toxic job. I did put up an entire post about blame and shame yesterday, so I will link that in the description if you want to go and check it out. One of the big things to emerge from my last video was really a discussion, and a lot of people were like, whoa, no one's ever acknowledged the fact that I blame myself and that maybe I shouldn't be blaming myself and how we're told to blame ourselves. And that is also incredibly toxic. Now, I think that there are several reasons why we blame ourselves when we are in a toxic job, when we have left a toxic job, then we start blaming ourselves for not leaving fast enough and all of that kind of stuff. Like you guys, you know the way that you're blaming yourself right now. So why do we do it? Well, first of all, I do think that most of us probably just gravitate towards accountability. The way that you were raised plays a big role in this. But when you have high ownership over your mistakes, you're committed to your personal growth, you're very open and receptive of being willing to admit when you have made a mistake and to see where you might have gone wrong in a situation, which is totally cool. And that is actually going to be something that makes you very successful in your career. However, in a toxic work situation, especially because a lot of you are high performers and top performers and high achievers, we really are so focused on how to fix the situation that we start to take accountability for everything that is happening. So the actual dynamic in the toxic work environment, if you haven't watched my toxic job science video, we talk about how this happens, but there's a lot of gaslighting, there's a lot of blaming, there's a lot of accountability transfers because toxic people that you work with just don't want to take accountability for anything that they've done wrong. So they turn all of their problems into you problems, which is so not cool. So when you're in a toxic job, on top of the socialization where you are an accountable human being, which is a good thing, the toxic job is now also going to layer in a healthy dose of you blaming yourself because everyone else is blaming you. And this behavior becomes a habit. So of course, when you're in the toxic job, when you leave the toxic job, you start to search for and find ways that you could have improved the situation, ways that you might have attributed to the toxic work environment. You blame yourself for staying in the toxic work environment for so long because you knew it was bad. You just didn't realize how bad it was. And then you blame yourself for not knowing that, even though there's no way of you really understanding what you were going through until you were out of the situation. And side note, that is your brain protecting you from the trauma that you're enduring in the toxic work environment. So quite honestly, if there's one thing that I want you to get from this video and from the conversations that we have here on my channel is I want you to stop blaming yourself. Now, of course, I want you to be accountable, but that doesn't mean that I want you to take all of the blame. There is such a thing as having too much accountability, believe it or not. And really, one of the things that I hope that you walk away from my videos with is that there are several things that you should not be blaming yourself for or holding yourself accountable for. Now, something that came up a lot in the comments on that last video and in my conversations with you guys is that there's a lot of people that are either hesitating to quit or have some regrets when they actually leave their toxic job because they're like, what if it wasn't toxic? What if it was me? And again, with things that are blaming yourself. And this is where you need to trust yourself. You know if that workplace was toxic for you. It doesn't have to be toxic for everyone. Remember, this is an individual experience, and your experience doesn't invalidate or validate anyone else's, and vice versa. And when you're in that toxic work environment, at the point where you're like, I can't take it anymore, I need to get out of here, chances are it was only going to get worse. Now, I know that this doesn't absolve you guys from blaming yourself or falling into that shame spiral, but I do hope that it helps you, and it's something that I want you to keep in mind. So feel free to save this video or do whatever you need to do and come back to it and even just listen to this piece whenever you need it. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is something that it's going to be a little bit of a hot topic for you guys, and it's something that I think is very natural for us to do, and it's actually something that we do a lot on this channel. And that is psychoanalyzing the toxic people at work. So one of the things that I've seen, especially working with toxic job recovery clients, either individually or in my toxic job detox program, is that one of the things that we want to do is we want to understand why it happened. Now, this is a very natural human response. We want to understand our experiences. We want to know the motivation. It's like if you ever see a crime, you want to know like why that person did that thing. We're fascinated, first of all, the dysfunction, because dysfunction has some inherent level of interest, at least for me. Maybe that's my criminology degree talking. But also we want to rationalize the reason why that happened. So we want to know that, you know, the serial killer was like abused and treated horribly in their childhood, and that explains why they grew up to be this terrible monster who hurts people. Now, in the context of our toxic job, which hopefully does not include any serial killers, but might include a psychopath or two, we want to understand the motivation for why the person did that. Why did they treat us like that? Why were they undermining us, discrediting us, bullying us, harassing us, all of these things? We want to understand. So again, I understand it, and I personally spent time doing this when I left my toxic job. But I think that there's something that's really important for us to take note of here. And that is that psychoanalyzing is not a solution. Us understanding the context that we're in when we are in the toxic job does not solve it. Us understanding the psychology and the psychopathy potentially of the toxic people that we were working with isn't going to solve the harm that we incurred as a result of being in that toxic work environment and working either with that toxic boss or the toxic coworkers, or maybe everyone was toxic. And let's face it, we can do all sorts of guesswork and we can psychoanalyze until the cows come home. It's all guesswork and it's all speculation. And I think that there's something that fundamentally a lot of toxic job survivors really want in the situation. They want that person to know where they went wrong. They want them to do better in the future, right? Like, we want humans to grow. We want them to feel bad when they hurt us, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what a normal, empathetic human is going to do. They're going to feel bad. But when you're working with toxic people at work, we need to understand that that might not be something that they are capable of. There's a study that said about 20% of corporate leadership could be diagnosed with psychopathy at some level. There's actually a range there. And what do psychopaths lack? They lack empathy. So even if you totally didn't do anything wrong whatsoever, and this person was actually a psychopath, they are not capable of feeling remorse. You're never going to get them to say sorry. They're never going to feel bad for the things that they did. They're just going to justify them in their own heads, which is something that even the non-psychopath toxic people that you work with are going to do. We need to face the fact that that person might not feel bad. They might feel justified in their conduct and the things that they did to you in that toxic workplace. Because remember, just like what constitutes a toxic job, them acting that way, and especially if it was a toxic team or the entire company was toxic, this is a feature, not a bug. So they're not going to say that they're sorry. They're not going to feel bad. So there might not ever be any resolution in terms of them apologizing to you, or them feeling bad, or them acknowledging the things that they did wrong. And I know that that sucks, and this is where I find a lot of people are spending too long in the dwell phase. And trust me, I am not someone who's like, don't dwell about it, don't be mad, don't have your feelings. No, no, no. I want you to have all of them. They are necessary. I do believe in setting parameters because I don't want you guys to ever live in that place. It's not a happy place to be, but it is something that we need to visit because it is part of the toxic job recovery process, whether it's pleasant or not. But I do see a lot of people that get stuck in the dwell phase because they are trying to understand the situation. They're trying to understand the motivations. They're trying to understand that person, and what they really want is for that person to apologize and there to be some sort of closure in the situation. But when there isn't, what do you actually do in order to get over this toxic job? Well, that brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about in this video, and that is forgiveness. Now, right away, you might be like, Jennifer, you are nuts. There is absolutely no way I'm going to forgive my toxic boss. Now, I know that a lot of us have a different perspective in terms of what forgiveness is. So I want to be real clear here in terms of what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness does not mean that you are saying that what happened is okay or that you're condoning any of their behavior at all whatsoever. Forgiveness does not mean that you are repressing the emotions and the hurt that you experience as a direct result of the situation. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And again, forgiveness does not forego accountability. So you're not saying, oh, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It's fine. You're fine. It's all fine. Let's just put that down in a box real deep. In fact, in my opinion, I think that forgiveness requires that you acknowledge what they are accountable for, that they are accountable for the harms that they caused, whether they are accepting that or not, and forgiving the individual. Let's just touch on what the definition of forgiveness actually is. And I love this, so I'm just gonna read it straight off the website. It's from thegreatergood.berkeley.edu. And it says, psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards a person or a group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. And here's the real thing about forgiveness. And for this, I'm going to tell you a personal story from my toxic work experience. For a long time after I left my toxic job, I was very, very mad at my toxic boss. I was quite honestly bitter AF about it. And I spent a lot of time and energy and attention to the fact that I was hurt. I didn't want them to be successful. I didn't want them to be happy because I was miserable as well. But let me ask you a question. For all of my misery and all of my ill will that I was feeling because I was very bitter about this toxic job, what impact do you think that had on my toxic boss? Zero. The only person that was being hurt by me dwelling on that toxic job and not figuring out how to get over that toxic job was me. It was impacting me personally and professionally. I was miserable, and that misery was walking around with me everywhere that I went. Forgiving that toxic person that you worked with isn't releasing them. It's releasing you. And that really is who you need to forgive in the situation. We just talked about how much we blame ourselves for staying in a toxic job or staying in a toxic job too long or for leaving a toxic job or for whatever it is. The person that you really need to forgive in the situation is you do need to forget yourself. So how do you forgive yourself, and how do you forgive these toxic people that you worked with, especially the ones that won't admit to doing any harm? Well, I'll tell you how I did it, and I hope that it helps you. First of all, we need to start from a place of empathy, both for ourselves and for other people. I know it's easy when you have had a toxic boss or a toxic coworker to just assume the worst about them. They're evil, they're immoral, they're malicious, they're psycho, like all of those things. We want them to be a bad person in the narrative because in our story, they are the villain. But remember, in their story, they're the main character and not the bad guy. So perhaps no matter how awful and toxic they were, maybe that is that person doing their best, which is unsettling when the behavior is toxic. And, maybe even seeking to understand their perspective. Like maybe my toxic boss thought I was a toxic employee. Quite frankly, his toxic behavior probably made me one. So it's not necessarily about understanding. It's not necessarily about validating someone else's experiences as being superior to yours. It's just having empathy for another human being and the fact that most of us are just humans trying to human as best as we can. Second, I actually hold a lot of hope both for myself and them in the situation. For instance, for my toxic boss, I hope that they have progressed a long, long way since they worked with me. I want them to succeed. I want their company to succeed. I want their team to succeed, just as I want that success for myself. But really what makes this possible and how I found the path to forgiveness and to really letting go and getting over my toxic job was the toxic job recovery process. And this process is the exact one that I'm going to be sharing with you guys if you come to my toxic job recovery workshop. It's totally free, it goes down in like week and a half. Details are going to be in the description bar down below. This is the same process that I used, that I help my clients through in order to recover from their toxic jobs and to get their career and their confidence back on track. What I want for you is to not be stuck in dwelling and miserable because of a toxic job. I don't want you falling into the toxic job loop. What I really want for you is for you to recover from your toxic work experience and start intentionally creating the best possible career that you can build for yourself. So that's really what it's all about. So if you're interested in joining, it is at toxicjobrecovery.com. All right, hopefully that wasn't too ranty and rambly and made some sort of sense for you guys. Let me know if this was helpful and if I'm gonna see you in the Toxic Job Recovery workshop. And just in case you haven't seen my last video that really sparked the conversation, you can go right here to watch it right now. But before you go, do tap that like button if you enjoyed this video. It really helps my channel and I appreciate it so much. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and becoming one of my career besties, and I will see you in the next video, my friends. Bye for now.